Listen to the rumble. Listen to the roar. Slowly in 3. They'll be flying off 4. Watch them now.
We are sitting at Murphy's Loft with Carl Mondschein, and we're going to talk about your racing family's history and history in this area. We are sitting at Murphy's Loft, which is about a mile up the road from Pocono Speedway. Raceway, they call it. Yes. I call everything a speedway.
It is.
We're here at the vintage event that your brother and you and the family, you guys put on, a bunch of helpers put on. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing event. We're going to talk about how that event came about later on. But I want to talk about your family's history, and not only that, the racing, the passionate racers around this area. We're in Pennsylvania, and anybody that knows sprint car racing knows Pennsylvania is its own entity of racing. If you're fast in Pennsylvania, you are going to be fast anywhere.
Proving ground for sure.
It is. And then when you come here and race, and the further east you go, you realize you start meeting a bunch of guys from New Jersey and New York, and it's, the modified racers and the TQ racers, and they go way back. And I've noticed everyone I meet is like a 3rd, 4th generation racer, and their passion is on another level. They are all about racing. Anything, everything. And your family's no different.
No, we weren't any different. We grew up eating spaghetti and chuck steak every night because we had to make sure we got to the races on Friday and Saturday night, and that's what it was all about, We didn't seem to suffer.
How far back does your family go, and where does it start?
It started with my grandfather in the 1920s and 1930s, racing Indian motorcycles.
Sweet.
Yeah, flat tracking, and was an Indian team rider.
Did he get to run any board tracks?
He did.
Wow.
He ran board tracks and in flat tracks.
Excuse me.
I'm not sure.
That was west of here.
Yeah, I think it was. There was lots of board tracks in New Jersey, even up and down the East Coast. New England had quite a few. Other than Altoona is out west of here, but I don't know that he went because he was from New York.
Yeah.
So he originated from New York.
In the 20s, Altoona would have been like the west end of the state of Pennsylvania.
Right.
That's a long haul.
That would have been
20s.
Yeah. It would have taken 4 days to get there. But motorcycles was his passion, and then my father, he would take my father to the Teaneck Armory indoor midget races, famous.
Damn.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you would just smell that castor oil because there was no vents, so you just got high.
This is the heyday of midget racing. Man.
Yeah, I mean packed, just unbelievable amount. The crowds were just standing room only, and then some, and. And so my father got the hitch on the 4 wheels rather than the 2 wheels, and so when he got of age, he actually got involved. My father got involved. He went in the Army, married my mother, started having kids. Me, I'm the oldest in the family of our generation, and he actually started with driving sports cars. He ran with a club called Skoda, and it was a circle track sports car. Club organization. They ran dirt tracks, half-mile dirt tracks, quarter-mile pavement tracks up and down the East Coast. Some of his fellow racers in that series was Steve Krisoloff and Al LaQuasto, all these early 70s IndyCar guys, a whole handful of other guys as well. And that organization was his first. Actually, prior to that, his first race was in his street car TR3 Triumph. He had a square tube roll bar in it, that meant nothing.
Oh yeah,
he took
common.
Common. He took masking tape, made a number X and a 2 on the side, and he and my mother with his rode up to Plainville, Connecticut.
Really?
Yeah, and ran that car and then drove home that night.
Jeez, that's awesome.
That was his. You could do that back then.
Yeah.
But he then got an Austin Healey. He had a small block Chevy in there.
Those are badass. Those are good looking rides.
Oh, beautiful.
I didn't understand those cars until I started working Zakira's, and the manager there had one that was nice and fast, and he drove it a bunch.
he ran that Austin Healey against Corvettes and Porsches and Jaguars, and it's a circle track. I mean, broad sliding through the turns in an Austin Healey with a small block Chevy. It was just amazing, you know. I was just a small kid, but man, oh man, our house was the Kool-Aid house. Everybody was at our house all the time. Oh my God. It was wonderful. Once that was in the mid '60s, and once he graduated, I got sick of that, and there was a decision to be made. And we were talking about Pennsylvania racing or East Coast racing before, and you know, we talk about the sprint cars in the central Pennsylvania area, but here on the eastern part of Pennsylvania and in New Jersey, we have Nazareth Speedway, half-mile dirt. We had Reading. Reading was our opener every March. We're out to see the USAC.
I've got a
boys.
short list of tracks that I wish I would have saw, and Reading's in the top 5.
No doubt about it. Reading
Langhorne and New Bremen. Those 3 I would have really liked to see.
My first race that I could ever remember as a child that was 7 years old that I could remember going to was the 1966 Langhorne 150 Championship race. And that was, I have pictures.
Was it paved or dirt then?
It was paved.
Yeah, but then?
It was, because it had gone back and forth, paved dirt. It was that circle, you know?
Yeah.
But my gosh, you know, we have the Dean Van Line's Andretti's car on an open trailer being towed by a Woody station wagon, you know? It was just amazing.
How big was Nazareth?
Well, there was 2 tracks.
Okay.
First, the initial track was the half-mile dirt.
Is that where Mario got his start?
Yeah, that's where Mario got his start. Yeah, and he and Aldo, and then in '68, Freed, who was the promoter of the half-mile track, opened up the 1 1/8. And that was up the hill.
Okay.
And man, that thing was just
that
crazy.
makes sense, because I've seen pictures of guys like Mario and Aldo running midgets at Nazareth.
Yes.
But then I've seen big cars at Nazareth.
Right.
And it never made sense. Like, why am I seeing midgets and champ cars?
Right. Well, they had champ cars, they had midgets, they had sprint cars, they had the modifieds, they even ran USAC stock cars on the dirt, on the 1.5 mile track, you know, or the 1 1/8 track rather. And I remember going and seeing not NASCAR, but USAC stock cars that time, and all those, you know, Lloyd Ruby driving the USAC stock cars there. You know, it was just phenomenal stuff. What a way to grow up. We all had personal favorites, and they weren't my family. there were other drivers, you know. But some of the names like Frankie Schneider, Al Tasnandy. My personal hero was Rags Carter.
Okay.
And a lot of those guys were. Oh, and Buzzy Rudiman, of course, who's still running today at like 78 years old and winning down in Florida. It's amazing. But we had those tracks. We had the famous Grandview Speedway that's still running weekly Saturday nights, and we used to run there with the midgets all the time on Sundays. All-Star Outlaw Midgets. It was a special, no real club, or you know, it was the Outlaw Midgets. Yeah. But that was a Sunday deal, and that was wonderful. But one of the personal favorites, I think, throughout our racing history, and everything from my father to even my kids. Was Flemington.
Oh, okay. I've read a lot about that.
Famous Flemington, 5/8 of a mile short shoots between the turns, squared.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's something to be said about short shoots, but anyway, that's another story.
Yep. Now that's good to mention. You got to run a vintage rear-engine Indy car at the Speedway.
I can die happy now.
Yes. Yeah. I remember you were getting which car was it?
It was the '83 Wildcat, Patrick Wildcat, Gordon Johncock car. He won the Atlanta 200 with that car.
That's a fast car. Is it Cosworth powered or?
Cosworth. Turbo.
I remember you posted pictures. You were going to run it, and I talked to you.
Yes.
And you kind of felt me out, like said, "What's it like?" And I said, "You're gonna like the short shoots."
That's what it was.
Because with the vintage cars, you can smoke them down a straightaway, and it's cool. But it's so big there that it's not only big, but you also get caught up in looking at the pagoda and the tower and the stands, and you're like, "Holy shit, I'm
the
at
canyon."
And your brain's going 1,000 miles an hour. And then when you get to the short shoots, you can play. You come out of the turn and gas it and go in, and it's just fun there.
I actually utilized your suggestion, and I did that, and it's even posted. It's online. I made a couple nice passes in the short.
That's where I passed all the guys.
Oh my God, I love it.
There. It's just those cars, the 80s, 70s, and 80s vintage rear engine cars. Love the short shoots.
You know, the car was still old enough where it was analog versus digital,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and it was still an analog car, you know, and you know, I didn't.
Man, that's cool.
It was wonderful.
Cool.
Definitely a highlight of my life. But
That is cool.
I also got to run here at Pocono a couple years ago, the Davey Allison 28 car. He won the Richmond. It's a short track car, but and I was the only one to ride that since well, I guess Ernie Urban had it for a little bit after Davey passed away, but I was really basically the first one to run it since 1993.
Man, that would be a fun car here.
It was just phenomenal.
Who was in the stock car today?
You know, I don't know.
It was like a 90s
It
era
was.
stock car.
It was. He was moving.
He was hauling.
He was on it. He was on it. Everhand was on the track at the same time, and he was a little bummed because he's trying to get to his 200 over the weekend here.
Yeah.
He might get it done tomorrow, but
the stock car was right there with him.
It just sounded so sweet, you know. There's something to be said about the sound of a stock block, you know.
Yeah.
But
I noticed that because I was watching Ray Everham go for 200 with the Ghost, and here comes this stock car right against the wall, screaming. I'm like, that guy's running with him.
I still have the chills right now. It was that good. You know?
I hope Ray gets the 200 tomorrow.
It would be phenomenal.
We talked
for him.
about it shortly. He's got the Ghost there, the car he ran up Pikes Peak,
right?
And they're trying to run 200 with it. And we ran the Ford GT here 2 or 3 years ago, and didn't really have a goal other than just go out and run 10 laps, and we're going to give you green flag, do what you want.
Right.
And we went out and ran, and the last 2 laps I really laid down good laps, and I was watching the telemeter in the car that tells you your digital speed, and I could run it. It all mattered about how quick you got out of 3 and 4. Everything was in 3 and 4.
Right.
If I could come out at 3 and 4 at like 140, 150, then I could go down the front straightaway and go for it. And 3 and 4 is not real banked, so you're kind of on edge there, and you come out and the wall's right there, and then you smoke down through there. And the last lap I was watching it and I saw it flash 180, and right when I lifted out of throttle it flashed 181.
Nice.
And then it was brake hard and try to get into one and thinking, damn, this is hauling ass. And I told Ray that, and I said, you know, it was, and then we came in, and Dorn and I talked, and Dorn said I could make some changes and we could probably get 190, 195 easy, but I don't think it'll do 200 with the gearing.
Right.
And I was down at Ray's a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about that, and that's where Ray's at right today. He hit 184 in the first session. Same deal. He's trying to get out of 3 and 4 quicker.
You mentioned something about a vacuum. I was talking about.
Yeah, and then what? But the only thing I can't figure out, I got to ask more tomorrow, is they're radaring him at the flag stand, and if they want 200, they're gonna have to go way down to go
maybe
into one.
down towards 1.
Yeah.
You know, maybe where the grandstand ends.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. I hope he does it.
Yeah.
I hope he does it. So now, you and your brother, when did you guys start racing?
I started racing when I was 17. You had to be 18 at the time. Oh, just to backtrack a little bit, my father went from Skoda driving the sports cars, and what happened was in the late 60s he decided that he needed to get out of that and get into something else. His first love was midgets because that's what my grandfather had brought him to.
Yeah.
And we had a little track in Pine Brook, New Jersey called Pine Brook Speedway, and it was built in 1962.
Cool.
And Mario drove there.
Yeah.
LaQuasta drove there.
Sachs probably drove there. Sachs run midgets, or was he earlier than that?
He was earlier than
yeah,
that.
because he was dead by 64.
He was, and he was already.
But I know he was a hell of a midget racer.
He was, and that would have been the Teaneck Armory days, you know, or something like that.
Okay.
But so Pine Brook Speedway was a little 1/10 of a mile oval, and you know, and you could. It would bring in the heyday Pine Brook Speedway, and it closed in '89. And there's a Home Depot there now.
Of course.
Yeah, what else? Home Depot or CVS, I'm not sure.
some parking lot.
Yeah, some parking lot. But Pine Brook was in its heyday. You would have probably 60 cars there on a Friday night.
Shit.
60 cars.
Damn.
And guess how many cars started the feature? 16.
16. And probably paid what, 300 to win? 300 to win?
Maybe.
On a big show.
We don't do this for love.
Exactly.
We do this for the love of sport.
Exactly.
You know.
I understand. God,
We knew that a long time ago.
Yeah.
But so it was a choice between that, and we had been going to the Nazareth Half Mile Speedway every Sunday as a family, just because we loved stock cars, and it was convenient for us. So his decision was, do I get involved with stock car racing? Do I have the room for a big old 35 Chevy modified, you know, or do I have room for a midget or a TQ midget, you know? And he decided to go with the midget route, which we're all sure happy that he did, because it's, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the modifieds and all that, but man, oh man, you know, you're an open cockpit guy.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing like it. And real race cars don't have doors, so you know.
Yeah.
So and you know, we can go one step further and say, you know, the pavement's for you getting to the dirt track, you know.
I agree. I'm running a pavement TQ tonight, and it's a blast.
Yeah.
But we have more than once looked at each other and said, "If this was dirt, we could make this thing haul ass."
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I know what to do on dirt.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. I know that. Yeah. Lucky enough for us here on the East Coast and where we're located, we have a good combination, and like Indiana, and I'm not sure about Michigan where you're from, but
more
we have
pavement, Michigan.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we have a great choice of dirt or pavement, or a lot of the dirt tracks have switched to pavement or closed up, unfortunately. But excuse me. There's been a great selection and diversification here. And in the old days, you could use one car for both dirt and pavement, you know, just switch that over, drop that over to the right, you know, drop it down a little bit, raise it up a little bit, or whatever the case is. So he decided to go midget racing. Pine Brook Speedway was big. The American Three-Quarter Midget Racing Association was a huge organization here on the East Coast. And again, 60. It wouldn't be uncommon to see 60 cars at an event.
When did the three-quarter midgets start?
The three-quarter midgets here started in earnest probably in the late 40s, early 50s, and they started indoors.
Okay, were they running in the 40s? Were they running like boat engines, or were they running Crosleys?
Well,
I mean, I know a lot of the midgets were running boat engines.
Yeah, there were Mercuries,
Mercuries,
and they were. The TQs were running Harleys.
Okay,
They were running. I guess any number of different types of motors, but the Crosleys were the top dog of the day, and they still
are. They were screaming
in the vintage division. And there's something, you know, those two bangers are fine, but man, when you hear a real motor go by,
oh my God! I was listening to Crosleys run tonight, and they were hauling ass.
I was lucky enough to win, I guess, 5 features over the last few years with a Crosley.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's just something about it that just gets you going. And a couple of those features were with a roll bar only.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So
now your dad's midget he got. What engine did it have?
It had a Bonneville Triumph 650.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it shook.
I bet that sounded good.
It did sound good. It shook like the carbs were mounted in rubber. You know, I mean, and there was. You always had to worry about something falling off. You know.
Was it shaft driven or chain driven?
It was shaft driven.
Okay.
In an outbox.
Cool.
Cool. In an outbox. No chains on the TQs back in the day.
Okay, that was a later thing.
A later thing, and micro sprints. Really brought that into the 600s.
Okay. Gotcha.
And the 270s too, but the TQs were all direct drive. You know, in an outbox. You know. And so he decided to go TQ racing, and he started in '68 and ran TQs, and we ran, and we still run Atlantic City Convention Hall in the winter, which I know you want to get out to.
Yeah, I do. I do. That's an excellent event.
Yeah, and there you go. That is reminiscent of the Pine Brook days, because you have 80, 100 cars trying to make the field, and unfortunately the track used to be a lot bigger down in Atlantic City before they rebuilt it. And right now it's just a bull ring, and it's not real racing.
Typical indoor.
Yeah, even worse than typical indoor. But back in the day, you literally had a tenth of a mile track, which was big enough for indoors to really actually run. You know, so it was cool. I made those races back in the day, and that was a lot of fun. But so he then moved up into full midgets in, I guess, probably around '78. I actually grew up and went in the Air Force, and he switched over to went up to the full midgets and ran with ARDC, American Race Drivers Club. And then there was there was some fractions going on midget racing here on the East Coast in the late '70s and in the '80s.
Now we're getting into Edmunds midgets, and
his second car was an Edmunds.
Yeah, God, those are cool looking.
My God.
They're still some of my favorite cars.
Let me tell you, when I got into the midgets, it wasn't my first ride, but my second, third ride was Edmunds, Sesko.
Yep.
Just to die for. Just to die for.
Excellent.
Edmund Sesko Flemington.
Wow.
Need I say any more?
Damn.
You know?
Man, that's cool.
It was just wonderful, just absolutely wonderful. But so he went into the midgets. I went away in the interim. My brother was getting of age, and they got him involved.
Are you older than your brother?
I am. I'm about 4 years older
Okay.
than he is. Yeah, and so but I started racing when I was 17. My father got me involved. You were supposed to be 18. He got me a fake driver's license.
Of course.
You don't want to let anybody know that. And it's funny is Pine Brook. We were talking about Pine Brook before and how hard it was to qualify for a feature. And I actually made the feature the fourth time out, which was like it was like huge for me. I was a 17-year-old high school kid, and I was just like, what, you know. And I was sort of like ha 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 too, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
But so
Any 17-year-old kid would be.
oh my God. So
You guys keep saying this is hard. What are
I
you talking
know.
about?
What do you want, man? You just got to be 17. That's all. So I remember I ran the feature and I finished, I don't know, 7th or something like that, you know. And after the race, this guy came over to me and started fighting with me in the pits. You were blocking.
Oh, Jesus.
I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, no man came up. You know, in those days it was hot and heavy. You know, well, wait a minute, there's no difference really.
There's none.
Yeah. So there you go. It's tradition
Yeah,
continues.
they were ready to throw down tonight after the feature.
They were.
That was
So
a wild feature.
It was. Oh, you tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, heck yeah.
They were ready to throw down tonight.
That was a typical Friday night at Pine Brook. What you saw tonight?
Yeah, they were. I mean, the two guys going for the lead had a hell of a race going. They took each other out, went to the tail, came back to the front. Then the next two guys, they had a hell of a race going, and the whole time there was all these other races going on, and guys rooting each other out of the way, and it wasn't like blatant terrible rooting. It's just
racing. East Coast TQ racing is
follow
what
the guy
it
for
was.
a couple laps and help him make up his mind and go on.
If he's not going to make up his mind, you want to help him make up his mind. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it was a wild show tonight.
It was, and then reminiscent of what it's all about here on the East Coast. Like you had mentioned earlier, you got this cross mix of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, New England, Michigan.
yeah, a couple out-of-towners thrown in there.
Right. So, you know, and you know, so if you're not ready for that game, if you're not coming into it with that game face on, then you're going to be shocked. You know, and
luckily I was prepared.
Right.
I had seen it before, and then I talked to a few guys that said, "Listen,
it's
these
real.
are vintage cars, but these guys are running hard."
Well, that's the joke. I mean, because when we first started the vintage division for the 3/4 midgets, we were all running spec car. I mean, like as they would have been, and now they're kind of cheating going on like anything else, you know. But back in the day, and you know, so there was rules. There was like, you know, no passing in the turns, and you know, you don't pass until halfway, and let's put a show on for the people, and these are vintage cars after all. Okay, we're race car drivers.
Line them up and go. Yeah, that's excellent.
You know, so foot to the floor the whole time, and that's how it's always been, and we all know it. You know, so
at 17, you're in the car. Your brother's he watching still?
He's watching. He's turning. You know, we're all turning wrenches. I turn wrenches for the old man. I was 12 years old, doing all kinds of preparation for the car so he can run Friday nights and Saturdays. Friday nights were always the Pine Brook Speedway. Saturdays we had the bigger tracks. We'd go to Wall Stadium. We'd go to New Egypt Speedway. We'd go run dirt with the TQs. There was a lot of uprights back then still.
Yeah.
Or roadsters that you could run on dirt. You know, there was none of these low
Offset,
slump. Yeah, right.
Modifieds.
None of that anymore. Yeah.
Those are midget East Coast modifieds.
They are. They're mini super modifieds.
I mean, the rear end's outside the chassis.
Oh, yeah.
The drive shaft, the engine, everything's outside the chassis.
When you're running those and you're hooked up proper, I mean, it's rails.
Oh my God, they got to be a ride.
I ran a modern, quote unquote, modern TQ just as an exhibition because as a matter of fact, your car owner Blue Mets put me in a modern car. And I hadn't been in a modern TQ probably in 20 years, you know, and oh my God, it was like literally like a slot car. I mean, just
they're bad news little
you
pieces.
just get on it, and it doesn't matter where you go, high, low, middle, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter. You just went, you know. It's wonderful. So running TQs, I got out, went in the Air Force, came back. In the meantime, my brother came of age and he started running TQs. My father was now in the full midgets, running full schedules all over the place.
Wow.
I got out of the service, I came back, I picked up a ride immediately in a TQ again. I only ran a couple races, and then a ride happened, was offered to me in a full midget, and I said, goodbye TQs.
Yeah,
you know, and started running full midgets, and then a lot of fair dates back in the early 80s. We ran all the fairs, the Bloomsburg Fairgrounds,
Cool.
which is iconic.
Yeah, that's cool.
Lehigh Fair, Bedford Fair, all the fair, and 10,000 people in the stands, not a seat to be had. It was just fantastic time for midget racing. Again, the rebirth of midget here on the East Coast. Reading was gone. I never got to run Reading. Williams Grove was allowing, running midgets. Lincoln, Sellingsgrove, Penn National. So we got to run all those.
Lincoln would be fine in a midget.
It was.
Williams Grove would be sketchy.
Big.
Yeah.
Big.
But Port Royal, did they ever run midgets?
I ran Port Royal.
God damn, they've been fast.
Port Royal was bumpy. And, the problem with the midgets, and you run midgets, you hit a rut.
Yeah, a rut to you guys and a rut to a sprint car is two different things.
Exactly.
Sprint car, you use that thing to pass a guy.
That's right. Right. In a midget, you lose that to lose it.
Yeah.
So that I remember Port Royal being a problem actually, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. With that. So. I was running the full midgets, and I never stopped running the full midgets all the way up until I guess about the mid '90s. And I never got the chance to run for a top team, and I was lucky enough to get rides.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to have the burden of ownership and driving.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, well, that's the only way to go, But I was never, me personally, I never had a top ride, we want to win, and that's the name of the game. But to me, looking back on a career that I've had since I'm 17 and I'm 60 now, having the opportunity to do that, starting 13th in a 24 car field at Flemington, coming down that front stretch on the wave lap.
Damn,
something about that.
Yeah,
and so I got to do that, and
we've got Dad's. Smart guy and understands history, and Dad was smart enough when we were running modifieds and other types of race cars all through the 80s and 90s. He would keep the lineup sheets, and you look back at it and you see the names in there.
How about that?
And it's just like, God, because at the time it's just a bunch of guys you're racing with,
right?
And then you look back like, God damn, we were all in that thing running together.
And
it's
and look where he is now.
Yeah, exactly.
And whatever happened to him?
Yeah, it's just super cool to that's and what you're talking about is that times 10.
Exactly.
It's the national champions you're lining up with.
Exactly. We had some of and speaking in the midgets, and we're a very tight group of people. Drew the Fenora family are phenomenal midget drivers, both. Drew Fenora, who was running today in that old Slingshot 02 white car.
Oh yeah, that thing was cool looking.
Well, that was a championship car, but Drew himself is a 9-time NEMA midget champion. He's in the Hall of Fame.
Damn.
His brother Noki Fenora was, I don't know, 15 championships or something. I don't know, and beat the USAC boys back in the day, and and all that. But so family, you had mentioned family and friends, and really generational here. It just keeps flowing, and all that. But I ran the midgets then through the mid '90s. I was not tired of racing, but tired of just middle packing it, And I had 3 kids, and it wasn't the time to, start investing in midget race cars, So I had other opportunities to run other cars, but every day you're only as good as your last race. In that point, and I had been running 20 years already by then. So what do? Like any other racing father does, let's go quarter midget racing. I got 2 boys and a girl, so we went quarter midget racing, and we got very successful at quarter midget racing. Yeah, my boys, my oldest son,
all pavement or dirt?
A little bit of dirt, mostly pavement. We have a track called Oak Lane Speedway, not too far from where we are. They ran the Grands there and Nationals and all that other stuff. And this is before USAC took over for quarter midget, so it was QMA back then. And 58 feature wins, the kid wins.
Damn.
My younger
Damn, that's awesome, man.
Yeah. Well, he at the ripe old age of 13, he said, Dad, I don't want to race anymore. I'm like, what do you mean? We win all the time. He said, yeah, it's boring.
Well, you have that.
Yeah. So I said, well, what about if we move up to micro sprints? He said, yeah, okay. So we moved up to micro sprints at 13. He was out there running against men and and doing well. And by the time he was 14, he said, I'm going to go be a rock star. So he did. He went out and became a rock star.
So he did. I've seen pictures.
Yeah,
he actually did.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Where's he at now?
He's local to us, and,
Okay.
and he's all about cars now. I'm surprised.
Good.
Yeah, I'm really surprised.
Good. Very cool.
Matter of fact, he's pretty psyched about this right now.
Good,
So,
man. Good. That's cool.
Um,
How long did your dad run?
he ran and he retired in '85, so he ran 20 years in racing, I suppose, give and take, and relatively successful. Became president of a midget organization here. Was a business manager for a lot of and a booker for a track booker, and very popular here on the East Coast. Our name became familiar with so many people and so many promoters and so many, and that's really part of the game as well.
Yeah.
It's PR, it's marketing, just like anything else.
I'm sitting here thinking drag racing and car stuff around Detroit's big because it's Detroit.
Sure.
Indiana and Southern Ohio and Illinois is big because you're close to Indianapolis.
Right.
California is big on racing because it's the car scene year round. There's always something that makes the hotbed a hotbed, and I'm trying to put my finger on what was around here that had so many guys racing.
Diversification.
Okay.
I really believe it's diversification. I believe that when you take across of personalities, and the New Yorkers become quote unquote the bad guys.
Yeah.
The New England guys become the whalers. The Pennsylvania guys are the Pennsylvania Dutchies. Or whatever
that makes
it is.
Fun, man.
It does, and
that makes sense. Yeah.
The camaraderie. You had mentioned it, the fierce battles that happened on track that had people in the stands on their feet for an entire night.
Yeah.
After the races are sharing beers and slapping, shoulders and having a great old time. And let's not even talk about the banquets at the end of the year, So
that makes sense.
And
I know you guys had a lot of racetracks, but you wouldn't have a lot of racetracks if there weren't a lot of people to run them and sit in the stands.
That's true.
You don't just have a bunch of racetracks for no reason. There's people that like racing around here.
I literally can remember back in the day when I was a kid, never ever standing room only at every track we ever went to. It didn't matter where it was. I don't ever recall seeing empty seats at any racetrack actually here on the East Coast, and that was why it was so devastating when tracks like Flemington and Reading and so many other tracks just disappeared. Because why?
Yeah, I know. Every hotbed has suffered that. I mean, that's just part of what we're doing now. And because so many tracks have closed down and the racing has kind of went on you could almost say it's streamlined. It's USAC, and it's USAC modifieds, wing sprint cars, World Outlaws. Every association has its thing, and it's very professional, and it's amazing, and it's top notch. Right. But because there were so many race cars back in the day, and so many tracks, and so many fans, that the vintage stuff has become extremely popular.
It really has.
And it's from the time I got into it till now, it's just tenfold. I mean, it just keeps getting bigger.
Well, you were one of the pioneers,
Got lucky.
Yeah. You had the foresight. You saw what was happening.
It's amazing that a guy like Gary and yourself and all your helpers, you guys can put together an event like this at a huge super speedway, and it works. It actually happens.
This all started, believe it or not, when we were about 7. It did. Sitting Indian style in the backyard, playing in the dirt with matchboxes and Hot Wheels, and God, if you had a Johnny Lightning, you were all hooked up.
Well, yeah, exactly.
It's funny because when we were kids, we were very tight, and everything was racing. Period. Everything was racing all the time, and so we used to laugh because we had clubs, and he had all of the IndyCar or the open cockpit type Hot Wheels and matchboxes, and I was the stock car guy.
Yeah.
I had the modifieds, and so that stuck with him forever. And this all actually started with the vintage move. Started with the TQ midgets, and he created, and I helped initially create this vintage TQ organization in 2012.
You guys found out what a lot of people have found out, that if you just scratch the surface, there's a lot of cars sitting in garages, and
there were many trips made all around the country to pull cars out of barns and swamps and famous cars.
Yeah.
Famous cars, you know.
Yeah. They're out there.
Yeah, that Whirly 02 that Drew Fenora was driving, that Slingshot is iconic car.
And more than half the time, the guys that ran it and the guys that built it are still around.
They are,
and they don't want to race full time, but they still want to race.
Well, the car that won today, exactly the car, and that's hence. Let's not overdo it because we're but let's still go out and have fun and run once or twice a month, and that's what we're all about now.
Yeah.
Because you got to get that trophy.
Oh yeah, yep, exactly.
The trophy never gets old. But the car that won today, one of the cars that won tonight in the vintage four-stroke, the number 75 Crosley, is actually, and the comment was made, that car is actually owned by the same guy who owned it in 1965 when it was winning races. Yeah,
that's cool.
It was very cool. So
cool.
What's old is new again, and so
now the when I first came on the scene, there were vintage clubs, Midwest Old Timers, VARC, a lot of small clubs running vintage stuff, and they were doing a great job, and they still do. There was a handful of vintage events like the Williams Grove Old Timers Weekend and the Winchester Old Timers event. Lattimore Valley. Those events have been around for decades. Yeah. I mean, I see pictures of them running those in like the 60s and 70s with like 1920s and 30s cars, and it's cool. And those events are still around, but now what we are seeing are these huge events like we're sitting at, and these are, it's odd to me. It's odd to a lot of people that, we've got vintage cars here. We've got 1930s, 40s, 50s Indy cars and sprint cars, and that's what you expect to see. But then you see the car I'm in. It's a 1986 Lola.
Right.
And to a lot of guys, that's not an old car. That's like, man, I remember that car. That was just a few years ago.
Well, it's funny how time goes by. Yeah, exactly.
And like the SVRA, if it's 10 years old, it's running.
Right.
That's a 2009 Indy car running at a vintage event.
That's right.
And if you're a racer, you know how quick things change in racing.
Right. That's why
10 years old is ancient.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly right. And hence back to the Patrick, to the Wildcat that I drove, analog.
Yeah,
I don't know if your car was an analog.
It is. Oh, it is. It's all mechanical gauges.
Nice.
There's no computer on that car.
So then,
it's a Cosworth with mechanical fuel injection.
We as a driver, that's what we're all about. I mean, I don't want to look at a Game Boy dashboard.
No.
So.
No. It just blows me away that, and the wave that we also talk about is a wave of popularity. 10, 20 years ago. I'm going to say like late 1990s, early 2000s, 2000 to 2005, the Indy Roadsters were king of the hill. Everyone wanted a Roadster. And the early front engine cars were amazing, and the Millers have always been hot. And there was a couple guys running the 60s era cigar cars. And
my personal favorite.
Oh yeah, and there was only a small handful of guys that were really digging them and liking them, and there was a lot of guys, old timers, that kind of were turning their nose up at it because they still lived through the rear engine revelation.
Right.
But what has happened in the last 10 years is the wave of the guys that can afford to do it, that can afford to restore these cars.
Key term right there.
Yeah, a key term. The guys that can afford to have a stable of these cars, bring 3 to 5 cars to an event like this in a semi-truck and run those cars. Those guys, that age group, is a wave that moves through time. And it's the same reason the muscle cars got to be $1 million muscle cars 10 years ago. Because all the guys that wanted them in high school in the 60s, they all became 50, 60 years old and could afford them.
That's right.
Now, the guys that were watching the 70s and 80s Indy cars, they're all in their 50s and 60s, and they can afford it. And the guy I drive for, Ken, he's, I'm going to say mid-60s, 68, and that's what he remembers.
Right.
And that's what he wants to spend his money on. And it's weird that wave's here. It's hit. And we saw it at Indy this year. Did you go to Indy this year?
I unfortunately couldn't get out there this year.
It was a weird scenario because I walked in there, and if there were, at Indianapolis for their vintage event, it has to be a car that started the race or attempted to start the race, a real Indy car.
pedigree.
Yes, exactly. If there were 80 cars there, 65, 70 of them were rear engine. It was all rear engine. And it was so weird to be at the Vintage Indy event and it was all rear engine stuff.
But you know what, though? It's okay with me.
It is
because,
me too.
because the
It is.
Roadsters had their day.
They did.
And
they had their day, and they're not going anywhere. They're in museums, and
I'm,
they're beautiful.
And I'm glad they are. But, man, I'm telling you, let me have that Eagle.
I'm with you. I like it. And it surprises me because I am such an old soul and such a traditionalist that there was a time that I didn't stop and look at rear engine cars. And then I had one bite my interest, and it made me laugh, was in Rick Mears' yellow Pennzoil car. Mm-hmm. And I stopped and looked at it, and it dawned on me, I rooted for that car.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I rooted for that car. And then I loved it. I'm like, oh, I like that car. And I watched it all day. And before long, I'm like, wait a minute now, I get this now. Because I like that car. It's what I did grow up with. Well, I remember watching that Indy 500 and rooting for that car.
You got that. Well, similar to me, and I got to sit in it. I didn't get to drive it, but I mentioned my first race that I can remember was 66 and 67 in Langhorne. And Roger McCluskey's Eagle, I think it was number 12, Batman kind of paint job on the front had come back out.
Oh, nice.
And it was at Pocono a couple of years ago, and I kind of convinced the guy to let me sit it.
Yeah, good, man, good.
Excuse me.
Man, that's cool.
And my brother actually got to take it out at Indy this past year, or this
Did
year.
He?
Yeah,
Nice.
It makes me jealous. But so that to me, the fact that I got to sit in that car, and I actually have pictures of that car at Langhorne
when you were watching,
when I was 6-7 years
That's
old,
cool,
you know,
man.
really comes together. But I love the Roadsters. I love the Offies. I love the Millers. I love all that stuff. It's what makes the next generation happen, you know. And just like we had talked, you know, every generation goes to the next generation, and now a 9-year-old car, somebody loves that 9-year-old car.
Yeah.
I don't, but somebody does.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that's, so you're right, and that's what happens continually going down the road, and that's always going to make a difference. And you know, interest will always go forward as long as we don't lose the history there. You know, I think so.
What's some of the biggest hurdles or issues you guys run into with trying to hold a vintage event at a super speedway like this?
I think probably some of the biggest issues is car counts, because although it is popular, there's still a limited supply, and after all, it is show business.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so you're only as good as your actors, or your plot, or your play, or whatever the case is. I think bringing the quantity and quality of cars to a show like this is important. You know, all the menial things like insurance, and you know, that's all done, and that's all important things and part of the show. But realistically, and Gary does a good job at this. He really does. He brings names in.
Yes. He goes after cars.
He goes after.
He
cars.
goes after us. He
has
wears
to.
us out.
Well,
and I don't blame. I know.
He has to.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
without us, and without you, and without Ray Everham, and without Jeff Bodine, who I think is here this weekend,
He is,
and without John Doran's cars, and AJ Foyt's car, and Walter Goodwin's here this year again.
Yep.
You know, you got nothing.
Yeah.
You got a bunch of sprint cars and running on Pocono, which is what happened with Cart and USAC anyway. So, you know, back in the day.
Yep. Yeah, it is hard to get those cars out. And, you know, I mean, I know I maintain cars and I prep them for these events, and I know what it costs.
Yeah.
And it's not cheap.
No, it's
and
not.
I mean, these guys aren't running for any trophy, anything.
Nothing. Not even a trophy.
Just to do it.
Just to
And
kick in
it
the ass
takes
of an
guys,
orange.
Yeah, it takes guys like Machine Gun Ken and those guys to do that. What are some of the other vintage type events you've been to and like, other than like a TQ? And because it's kind of, I mean, I've been to a couple vintage motorcycle events. They're huge.
Well, you know, I'm a big fan of Hershey, like you are. And
Yeah.
it's not an event, but just to walk through Hershey on a Thursday or Friday, you know.
Yeah.
My friend and I made a mistake 1 year or 2 years ago, and we went on a Saturday. Well, we thought was a mistake, but that's when the car show happened. So
Yeah.
I had never seen a car show like that in my life.
I saw it for the first time a couple years ago, and I had no idea that was there.
We did not either.
Oh,
and we were,
no way.
oh my God, I have never seen anything like that. But as far as on-track exhibition, I love the modifieds.
Have you been to the Race of Gentlemen?
You know,
because that's in New Jersey, Wildwood,
it's
New Jersey.
I know it is, and the reason why I haven't been is my son has been, and he said, "Dad, you don't want to go." First of all, you don't have enough tattoos, and second of all, you can't budge. You know, there's so many people there.
That's the downside. You should go. My excuse for going 4 or 5 years ago was I told Jenny, my wife, we need to go before it gets out of hand.
And it's out of hand.
It is out of hand.
And it's because, and you know, when it was outlaw, it was good. But
yes.
you know, unfortunately, it's mainstream now.
It's getting big.
Yeah,
it's getting awful
and that's
big.
good for the promoters and for the guys involved. But it's also takes away from it a little bit, you know, as well.
It does. What's your future plans for stuff?
I would like to actually, I was just talking about this today because I was watching you and the TQs out there, and I'm ready to go back racing again.
Good, man.
I took the year off this year. I didn't run anything at all this year.
Do you still have anything?
I don't, but I don't need anything because I can make a call.
That's right.
I'm hoping I could.
You got me a ride.
Hell
so
yeah.
you can get yourself a ride.
Trying to.
Yeah.
So, but I'm thinking about getting back and still in the vintage, and I would love to run an IndyCar again, and in the Cup car was cool, very cool, you know. So it's that kind of a thing that I'm looking forward to going forward. But if not anything else, just appreciating and enjoying and venturing out to see you guys and be a part of it, you know, whatever I can do.
Now, you interviewed me here a couple years ago. What was that for, and what was going on with that?
I have a little side gig called the Moon Racer One Network, and we're on YouTube, and really based on racing history. I got about 250 films on there, and
sweet.
A lot of people we were talking about the old tracks in Langhorne and Trenton.
Your Instagram, you post a lot of vintage. What's your Instagram?
Moon Racer One, or my name, Carl Mondschein.
Yep. And you always post vintage footage.
I do,
and it looks like home movies. And
it
stuff.
Is 8mm. Oh my God! And if you can deal with the music I put on it, then you're in good shape. You know, I try to do period stuff. But,
I highly recommend checking it out. It's good footage.
Appreciate that. I just love to present that history. We all have a job to do that we love, and in our sport. And you prep cars, and you redo cars, and you restore cars, and then we get to race them. I enjoy giving people who lived it the chance to see it again. People who haven't lived it, show them what they missed. Mm-hmm. And all history has to do is give to the future, and that's what I like to do. You know, and I'm an amateur at it, but I enjoy doing it. And like I said, if you can deal with my way of doing things, then you're going to enjoy it.
No,
you know?
I do. I enjoy it. I enjoy it. The footage that you post and the type of racing you're talking about, the only way a guy like me is ever going to learn about it is through your videos and through books. I wasn't there. I can't go back. And unfortunately, we lose guys every day that can tell those stories.
Right.
So you got to preserve it, and you're doing a fine job of that.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of the I've saved a lot of film, a lot of 8mm, a lot of VCRs, you know, and some of the quality is not to the utmost, but you know what?
It's part of it.
It's history is better than nothing.
Sometimes that's cool.
Yeah, and grainy and you know, but you know what? It's there, and I saved it, and that's what I'm proud of, and that's what I want people to see. You know, when I do that, and I do it for the love of sport is what I do it for.
That's awesome. Yeah. Now this one more thing. This event we're at, I want to kind of push it. The Indy cars are here running. Mm-hmm. I had my parents come out to this one because I told them, I said, you will not be bored at this event.
What a pleasure it was to meet them finally, by the way.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Crazy mother.
Yep, yeah, she travels the world nonstop. She was just laughing. She's been up since like 3 a.m. She took a walk, and you know, there's so much going on at this event. You got the Indy cars running. Today they weren't on track. Tomorrow they will be practicing twice and qualifying, and then Sunday they race. Right. The vintage stuff, which is A group and B group, which is 100 mile an hour and down, and then the B group's 100 up to 145.
Give or take.
Give or take. And then you have vintage stock cars running. And then there is a vintage race car show tomorrow. That's just cars on display.
Right.
And you guys, there's a lot of guys that pull like unrestored old cars out for that I saw last couple of years that were cool.
Well, you know what? The unrestored ones are probably that's the new gig.
I like
isn't
it, man, because
you know?
it's a time capsule for me that I know is not lying to me.
It's one of the reasons why I actually do not like resto mods. I just don't.
That's lying to me. When I see an unrestored original car that hasn't been touched, I know like that's how it was done. That's how those race cars were built, and that's to a restorer. That's valuable.
Absolutely.
When I see a car that's fully restored, it's pretty, but I've seen too many of them restored, either wrong or over restored, and I know like that's lying.
And you don't want to get lied to. You just don't.
There's the 2-seater IndyCar riding with Mario Andretti going on. Al Unser Jr. was walking the track.
Ran into him today. Talked to him for a little bit.
He was in my second session.
Was he?
Yeah, he was in. Might have been in Gary's car.
Well, I unfortunately missed that. I got there late today, unfortunately, but but I ran into him outside of the track, and he's like, yeah. He said, I'm going to surprise Gary. I brought my helmet with me. Oh, good. So I guess he surprised.
He did. He ran our session, and I saw him afterwards and mentioned. I said, I was in your session, and he said, which car? And I said, I was in the Newman Haas car. And he shook his head and he went, you went by me, and I thought that's the car I want to be in. I said, trust me, you do.
Yeah,
that's a fun car.
But I didn't hear you.
And then the vintage not only vintage TQs but modern TQs, they set a track up on the apron down in turn 1 and race on the track at Pocono with lights at night.
Right, and that's built over the last few years
that's
as
awesome.
well.
That's a big event.
And tomorrow, the actual modern TQs will be there. The ATQ MRA, which is
sweet.
Which is
some
like
more showing up.
But
damn.
The real,
Nice.
I mean, the ones that were there tonight are the limiteds, if you will.
Okay, I heard him say that, and I didn't know what they were talking about.
Lower horse restricted, but tomorrow full blown out. The ones that would race at Atlantic City Convention Hall and all that stuff, so they're going to be out tomorrow as well. And they give a little, and they put out a little bit for everybody. The go-kart guys and
there was go-karts there running, outlaw karts.
Yeah, it's really cool to say, I ran Pocono.
It is. It is. And then when we were pulling out tonight, there is a dirt quarter midget track.
Yes, West End,
and they were running.
Oh, those kids they're all about running.
It's weird to see a dirt quarter midget track for us because they're not popular where we're at. It's all pavement.
We had one dirt. Well, I mentioned earlier that I had the boys running quarter midgets, and most of the tracks are pavement, but we did have a dirt track, and it's still there, I guess, down in Delaware. So we traveled to Delaware, and we didn't have dirt tires or anything. You get to siphon out the old tires and get them out there. And boy, I'll tell you what, they had a great time. And it made me as a father made me a little bit more nervous because they hadn't been on dirt yet. But I was always a dirt fan anyway.
That's cool. That's cool. There's tons to do at this event. And then Sunday's the race, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. I love hearing the history. I'm glad to learn it because right there, that was me learning it. Because I knew you had family history, but we're always so busy at these events. We don't get the bullshit.
No, I know, and you know what? I've been looking forward to this for a long time, my friend.
Good. We'll plan on doing it next year, and I want updates from your new TQ ride.
Done.
Man, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. I will see you tomorrow at the track.
Take care, man.